Perfect. Okay. Well, I am going to go ahead and get started then. So, my name is Laura Kastenbauer. I am from Clean Water Action Minnesota office, and I am the Field Work Program Organizer. So we are focused on sustainable ag, and one of the things that we wanted to talk about was everything having to do with food and climate. Before even starting the presentation, it was really difficult to narrow down exactly what to talk about because there's so much that we need to talk about with food and climate. Oh, we have another one. Hi, Zach. So with food and climate, you have a wide variety of topics that you can talk about, and this can splinter off to a ton of different conversations. But what I decided to focus on was the overall effect of it, and also kind of looking at the cyclical loop of why food and climate are directly tied to each other. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Okay. And here we go. So can everybody see my screen okay? Thumbs up or okay. Just want to make sure. So let's kind of dive into it, the connection between food and climate. So a little bit about the Field of Work program itself. And what we do is we focus on sustainable agriculture. So we're focused on sustainable food and sustainable feed. We're also really focused on protecting natural resources, including soils, native landscapes, and of course, we're Clean Water Action, clean water. So we directly look at the way that agriculture affects our waterways, affects our climate, and affects our overall environment. So obviously that ties right into climate change. And two of our major things that we're looking at is how to change the market and how to change policy. So with this, we are looking at how exactly can we work together to kind of change the way that food is being sold, produced, and change the demand. And also on the other side of things, changing the way that policy is. So making sure that people have access to affordable and sustainable food. So we have a little bit of background about food and climate change. And first thing is setting a ground knowledge of what is weather versus climate. It seems to be kind of a confusing thing. So the term weather actually refers to how the atmosphere behaves in a specific area over a short period of time, usually hours or days. Climate refers to general weather patterns over a broad area for a long period of time. Both weather and climate account for qualities like temperature, precipitation, and humidity. So whenever we're talking about climate change, we're looking at the long period of time and the trends that are happening with that. Right now, we are experiencing an unprecedented rate, a term that in 2020 became very, very popular, but it is unprecedented. The global climate warming is raising at an extreme rate, as you can see in this graph here. We have, starting around the 1800s, just an exponential growth of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide in our air. Evidence suggests global temperatures will continue to rise and that human activities such as fossil fuel combustion, deforestation, and agriculture are dominant changes or causes, which is why we want to change the way that agriculture is functioning, because it's one thing that we can do either on an individual level or as a higher level, such as talking about what meat is being produced and being sold in our grocery stores. These activities actually release greenhouse gas emissions such as carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide that trap the sun's heat and warm the atmosphere, hence the name greenhouse gases. Natural processes also produce greenhouse gas emissions. However, these are generally have been counterbalanced by the capacity of trees, soil, oceans, and other storehouses. That way they can actually take and capture the emissions that were originally happening and be able to transfer them into something better for us. So, why exactly is this a worry? Why is it a threat to us? Climate change is among the greatest threat to our generation and the generations to come. It is a threat to public health, ecosystems, and the economy. The projected impacts of climate change, many of which are already occurring, include more frequent and intense hurricanes, floods, heat waves, and other extreme weather events, increased heat related deaths, food and water shortages, forced migration from rising sea levels and natural disasters, increased damages from flooding and wildfires, spreading insect-borne and waterborne diseases. So, as all of us are experiencing across the country, we are experiencing extreme weather patterns, especially this summer. It has been either flooding or droughts and wildfires. So, I actually talk to farmers quite often on a regular basis. And there are farmers in Minnesota that are trying to figure out which quarter of their crop they are going to salvage because of the way that the drought is happening in Minnesota, which will lead onto the supply and the price of food and everything like that, which we're going to talk a little bit more later. But it is currently happening. It's literally happening right now. So let's talk about the impacts of climate change on agriculture first. So agriculture has always been at the mercy of unpredictable weather, but a rapidly changing climate is making agriculture an even more vulnerable enterprise. In some regions, warmer temperatures may increase crop yields. The overall impact of climate change on agriculture, however, is expected to be negative, reducing food supplies and raising food prices. Many regions are already suffering from high rates of hunger and food insecurity. The elevated levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide are also expected to lower levels of zinc, iron, and other important nutrients in the soil, which means it's going to directly affect soil health. With changes in rainfall patterns, farmers are faced with dual threats from flooding and droughts. Both extremes can destroy crops. Flooding washes away fertile topsoil that farmers depend on for productivity, while droughts dry it out, making it more easily blown away or washed away. That directly affects our water systems as well. So whenever the topsoil gets washed away into our waterways, it can pollute it, especially if there has been fertilizer or pesticides or any kind of chemicals that were added to the crop that goes straight into our waterways. Higher temperatures increase crops' water needs, making it more vulnerable for dry periods. Certain species of weeds, insects, and other pests benefit from higher temperatures and elevated CO2, increasing their potential to damage crops and creating a financial hardship for farmers. A lot of farmers are kind of, especially after the past year or so, and with the really harsh summer that we are currently experiencing, they're kind of rethinking whether or not they're going to go on being farmers. So the financial hardship for farmers is extremely difficult. Shifting climates also mean that the agricultural pests can expand to new areas where farmers haven't had to previously deal with them. Also, the lack of food access increases price of our food in our grocery stores. So how many of you have noticed that the price of food has increased exponentially in grocery stores? So I'm seeing a few hands up there. That is a mix of several things. It's a mix of transportation costing more, businesses wanting more profit as well. And it has to do with the amount of food that we have to be able to sell. When there are food shortages, obviously the price goes up. So during off seasons or whenever there's a bad crop, the price of whatever produce or meat that they were producing tends to really increase, which makes it very, very difficult for everybody who's trying to afford groceries and be able to feed themselves and their family. So let's kind of flip it around and look at how food systems contribute to climate change. So, food systems activities include producing food, transporting it, and storing wasted food in landfills, which produce greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change. Of these sources, livestock production is the largest, accounting for an estimated 14.5% of the global greenhouse gas emissions from human activities. Meat from animals such as cattle and goats are particularly emissions intensive. So the 14.5% of the global greenhouse gas emissions is roughly around the same amount of emissions from all cars, trucks, airplanes, and ships combined in the world today. In general, beef and lamb have the biggest climate footprint per gram of protein, while plant-based foods tend to have the smallest impact. Pork and chicken are somewhere in the middle. And you can kind of take a look at the green graph there and see exactly how much of a carbon footprint each type of meat or each type of not veggie, but plant-based food actually emits. Is any of this surprising to anybody at all? Like, I found it absolutely fascinating. I thought that pork would be a little bit higher up and lamb would be a little bit farther down. I thought those two would be switched just from other articles that I've been reading, but beef and lamb definitely are the main contributors. So let's talk really quick about food waste and what exactly that entails, because that is part of the food systems that is largest amount of um yes, yes, I fully agree. I am surprised at the gap between the fish and the crustaceans as well for it. Um, for wasted food, we tend to be a fairly wasteful country in general. We tend to have no problem throwing things out that might not look perfect or might not be exactly what we want. So, with every year, 30 million acres of cropland, 4.2 trillion gallons of water, and nearly 2 billion pounds of fertilizer are used to grow food that's never been eaten. That's food that gets thrown away. The latter is particularly concerning since nitrogen-based fertilizer is a major cause of water contamination and a significant emitter of greenhouse gases. Reducing food waste is one of the most important things that we can individually do to be able to combat climate change. So, there is also the transportation side of it as well. With transportation, it is on average, any produce and any meat will travel over 200 miles to get to the grocery store. So, with that, you need to think about where exactly you are buying your food and where it's coming from. So, if you can buy more locally, that is fantastic. It lowers the carbon footprint because it doesn't have to transport nearly as long, tends to be fresher, has more nutrients, and is in general healthier for you and the planet. So, what exactly can we do? That's the big question here is what can we do to combat this? What can we do to participate in the food system, which we need to do because we all are humans, we need to eat and not affect the planet in a negative way. So, one of the things I looked into was the food boxes, those subscription boxes. And overall, they actually had pretty low carbon footprint compared to grocery stores. So food boxes are a great alternative, especially Hungry Harvest and Imperfect Food. Imperfect Food actually rescues at least 10 pounds of fruits and vegetables from going to waste per box, which equals out to be about 30 million pounds of food and 900 million gallons of water from being wasted. They portray themselves as just disruptors of a broken food cycle, but critics may also say that they are disrupting something else, which is CSAs. So they also are trying to, both Hungry Harvest and Imperfect Foods, is trying to create a carbon footprint of net zero by 2030. They're trying to alter the way that they are transporting food, making it so that it's more locally sourced and doesn't have to travel as far, and making sure that all of their packing is 100% recyclable and compostable. So they're working on trying to become net zero, but aren't quite there yet. CSAs are the best way to be able to participate in the food system without contributing towards climate change and negatively towards the earth. With CSAs, you are supporting local farmers, you are supporting the local economy, which is great, and the food doesn't nearly have to travel as far. Most CSAs have restrictions, so farmers do not have to, or farmers cannot put pesticides and other negative things that needs to be grown organically. And I would definitely recommend looking into a local CSA. Typically, they get full pretty quick. The other thing that you can do is shop at farmers markets as well. So look up your local farmers market and really talk to the farmers, figure out what their process is behind. Yeah. So look at where exactly they're producing everything and what their process is. It's great to be able to talk to the people directly that are producing your food, because you can find out exactly what their process is and find out if they are growing things sustainably. So there's other things, and one of the things is a staple to the Field to Fork program, which is we encourage people to eat less meat and better meat. So we're not saying that you have to go 100% vegetarian, but pay attention to the meat that you're buying, where it was produced, how it was produced, and try to buy 100% lifetime grass-fed if possible. That has the lowest impact on the planet. And also pay attention to how much dairy you are consuming, because that is another huge contributor towards greenhouse gases. So you want to also take a look at substitutes. So if you are looking at eating beef and lamb and cheese, you might want to look at substituting that for pork, chicken, eggs, moss, and anything that has a smaller footprint. Plant-based foods like beans, grains, and soy tend to be the most climate-friendly options of all. So try to go more plant-based, but if you are going to eat meat, take a look at where exactly it's being produced and how it's being produced as well. So that is it, pretty much the food systems in a nutshell, having to do with how exactly that affects climate change. I do have a couple of quizzes I'm going to put in the chat. One of them is testing your knowledge on what foods you should be eating and what labels you should be looking for, and it's kind of a fun little quiz. The other one is actually a drop-down box where you could select a food and it tells you what the carbon footprint is behind that food on a national scale. So you can take a look to see if how much of a carbon footprint normal meat is being produced. So like if you just want to find out ground beef, you can select that and see the carbon footprint of it. So I will put that in the chat. And I would love to have a conversation with everybody here and let's talk about what exactly we can do to take a look at what we are consuming and ways that we can be proactive in choosing our food and how we can participate in the food system without being negative towards the environment. So I guess my first question would be towards everybody, where do you typically buy your groceries right now? If you don't mind putting in the chat or going off mute. And you can be honest, if it's Cub, Kroger, that's okay. Okay, we got Trader Joe's, Target, Cub and Fresh Time. We got Farmers Market, Whole Foods, Cub. So I'm seeing a lot of the traditional chain. Yes, Community Garden and Aldi's. So Yeah, Minnesota doesn't have Meyer, but we do have Aldi. I've never heard of Sprouts or Fry's, but I know you're down in Arizona. So I like the equals Kroger's. So kind of gives me an idea of what kind of grocery store it is. So if you had no limitations, where would you buy your food? If location and money did not matter, how would you get your food? I'm seeing a lot of typing happening. Farmers market or equivalent. If money didn't matter, exclusively from farmers market and local specialty shops. Sustainable farmer or farmers markets, co-ops, farmers market, CSA. Absolutely. So one of the major limiting factors for anything having to do with grocery stores and food is cost. It absolutely is cost. We did do a major survey that happened just last January, February. It was during the winter, where we pulled a bunch of our members to figure out what exactly do they look at when they're buying groceries. And the number one limiting factor was cost and location. So one of the things that we are trying to work on as part of Field to Fork program is making sure that whatever we are advocating for, it does not increase the cost for people. We don't want people to be priced out of good food. And also, we're looking at trying to promote different farmers markets, trying to get out there, talk to farmers, and trying to get good, sustainably grown food more readily available and cost efficiently in grocery stores so that you could go to Cub and have more than one option for 100% lifetime grass-fed beef, and it's not $10.99 per pound. So we're trying our best to kind of figure out how exactly that is going to look in the future. And we're talking to different grocery stores and talking to different farmers and working with them on that. So I think that the ideal for a lot of people who would participate in something like this, where you're really interested in food and climate change, would be buying it direct from the farmer. And we want to be able to make that happen more. Um, so whenever you are taking a look at the food that you're buying for the week, I highly suggest taking a look at farmers markets, because even though typically farmers markets have a reputation of being more expensive, they might not be. So take a look at your local farmer market. I know that there is one in downtown Minneapolis that is very comparable to the prices that you have in Cub for certain things, certain farmers. I'm not going to say all, but for things like mushrooms and tomatoes and things like that, they were very comparable in pricing. So don't be afraid to take a look, take an audit, do an inventory of the local farmers markets and figure out which ones have the best pricing and which ones you really want to support. The other thing is taking a look at your local CSAs. It makes it really easy and convenient. There's even CSAs that will deliver straight to your door, so you don't even have to shop. They will just deliver a box to you of locally grown produce, which is my dream. I hate grocery shopping. It's one of my biggest hated chores. Um, so one thing that I suggest is looking into CSA. They typically are okay for affordability, but remember that you are helping the local economy. So if you can, I highly suggest it. And make sure that you take a look at timeframes, because a lot of them have a spring cutoff. So make sure that you, yes, they also give you recipes. And a lot of the time it's sustainably, they tell you how to use all of the produce in the box. So, and that is another thing, is when taking a look at not only what we're buying from the grocery store and making sure that it's grown sustainably, is making sure that we use everything. we want to make sure that we utilize and try not to create any waste in the kitchen. The kitchen is one of the most wasteful spaces in the house. So if, what I highly suggest is taking a look to figure out what exactly can you use everything of, such as eggs. The shell for eggs is actually a really, really good soil additive. So it's a really good natural fertilizer. Same with coffee grounds. So you don't have to throw away coffee grounds. I actually go outside and dump it straight on my garden. Um, and then there's carrot tops, that the green top of the carrot that typically gets thrown away, creating more food waste. That actually can be a really good substitute for cilantro if you hate cilantro. So it has a little bit of like a tang to it, but it doesn't taste like soap to people. Um, so just get creative in the kitchen, make sure that you're not wasting food whenever you can, and use everything that you have. So I would love to open up the floor to any questions that people have. Feel free to go off mute too. We have a small group here today.
It's more of a comment real quick, Flora, on, because Clean Water, we do this work on market, but we also do work on policy. We mentioned it briefly. So I was just thinking maybe I could take a minute to talk about a couple of the policies that we want, that we think would really help improve both climate and our food system. Because most of our foods, thank you. Yeah, most of our, I would say close to 90% of our food system is corporate. It's broken. It doesn't benefit the community. It doesn't benefit our water. It doesn't benefit the workers that are in those factory farms. So some of the policies that we need to do, are very difficult because there really isn't the political will in Minnesota and even nationally. Even if we think of Democrats as being better on environment, even if they took over, it would still be an uphill battle for us to make a lot of these reforms, which is why our market work is really important. If we can change what consumers are demanding, that then the companies change for that. They don't make stuff in general that people don't want to buy, then they wouldn't make money. But on policy, we definitely need to push them as well. So things like creating more incentives for better, more sustainable methods, like sustainable pasturing, and things like regulating factory farms better, enforce, they have to put together manure management plans. Nobody really enforces those. We have way too much manure and fertilizer in the state, like probably 4 times as much as the land can take. So like that's where we need to get involved in changing that system where people are profiting off of making our water dirty. And that's what we're going to keep doing, because ag right now is a problem for climate and is a problem for healthy food in general. It's not just our climate, but it's food. It can be a part of the solution for both of those, healthier food and a healthier climate, if we make a lot of these landscape changes where we're not just growing corn and soybeans to make ethanol and feed factory farm animals, but our landscape is actually, it'll be more beautiful too. It'll be full of native grasses and perennial flowers, and clean water and clean air, and a fairer economy, where more of the wealth is distributed to the people who are doing the producing, and not corporations in Minneapolis or whatever state capital it is. So that was just my little quick hit on all the policies that we need to change.
I love that. A non-policy side too is we also are working really closely with restaurants as well. In fact, we have a green restaurant tour here in Minnesota. I'm going to put a little link in the chat. So we have 20 restaurants that we have selected that are sustainable. So they really pay attention to how they source their food. And we have decided to promote them and really talk about what exactly they are doing correctly and what we can do to support them, especially small businesses have hurt over the past year or so because COVID restrictions. So I highly recommend checking out the link in the chat, and you can sign up and be able to get your passport and go and visit the restaurants, get entered in for a drawing as well for different $25 sustainable dining gift cards. So we want to help out small businesses and small farmers as much as we can here. Any other questions or comments or thoughts?
There's a question in the chat from Jen, if you want to check that out.
Yes. So what actions would you suggest to amplify the impact beyond our own shopping habits? Our own shopping habits is obviously the easiest thing to change, but advocating on the policy side is another great way to be able to change the market, and advocating for other people to do this as well. So whenever you are going to a farmer's market, sign up for a CSA, changing your own shopping habits, talk to friends, talk to family. I actually really love the idea of tripling your efforts. So for everything that you do, you find 3 people and get them to do that as well. And then they can get 3 other people to do that as well. And it just helps amplify the amount of people who are interacting and doing these actions. So our own shopping habits, it's the easiest though, to be able to create an impact.
And Laura, I think, to Steve's point about policy, doing things to make sure that candidates for office and elected officials know that there is strong public support for these kinds of changes is incredibly important to creating that political will. So anytime there's an opportunity to talk with a lawmaker or a candidate, bringing up these issues with them can really make a difference. And if anyone thinks they might want to do that, we've got lots of information about on our website about things you can ask them about. So we're happy to help with that. But that's also, letting politicians know that we care about these things is really helpful. And even writing letters to the editor, especially if you're in places where you might have more conservative leadership, and just showing that public support. I think folks in rural communities are often surprised at how many folks in their community share those and share those values, but maybe are afraid to say something because they don't want to be the only ones. So those kinds of things can be really helpful in just raising the visibility of the issue and showing that there are definitely folks that are on the right side of this.
Absolutely.
Add a couple. You could join Clean Water Action, help fund our efforts at the Capitol. You could vote, educate yourself on who's good on these issues. We'll in the past, we've done voter guides or asked the candidates on drinking water issues, Great Lakes. I am pretty sure we're going to have a climate one this coming up year. So that could be a resource for you. And then, something more personal would be if you have the ability to do so, have a backyard garden. I mean, make your own food. There's almost zero transportation there. And if you do it sustainably, like you compost all of your food waste and your paper products, you can add into your soil that way. Just trying to be as zero waste as possible. Use less plastic when you can, without wasting food, buy in bulk. Because in the past, I've made that mistake where you buy things that are on sale, or you buy things in bulk and then you end up wasting them. So that can be the the downside to that. But when that works, I would say go for that too. Go to a lobby day. We do lobby days too every once in a while. A lot of environmental groups will do those, where they'll train you to go in and talk to your legislator and give you all the info on the issues there too.
And then one last thing is, using your power to talk to people at the grocery stores, to talk to people at restaurants, to talk to neighbors, and to just kind of spread the word and thank the places that are doing the right things and encouraging them and showing them support, and positive reinforcement can be incredibly powerful.
Yes. And kind of branching off on that idea, whenever you're in a grocery store, take a look around to see what kind of packaging is happening. So not just food waste, we're obviously worried about food waste, but it really bothers me when I see oranges peeled in a plastic container and things like that, that it makes no sense. There's no reason for plastic to be involved in that situation. So pay attention to what is happening in your local grocery stores and talk to the grocery store managers, write a letter to them, let them know that you're not happy about how they're packaging their food and presenting it to the public. So any way that we can minimize plastic and that side of waste too, let's do it.
That was a really long answer to a really short question.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
I would just maybe quickly add in that I think in everything we've talked about, it's always important to look at it from an environmental justice lens. Obviously, not everyone is impacted equally by these issues, and the solutions are definitely not made easily available to everyone equally. So yeah, when you are doing that, voting or talking to people in power or any kind of advocacy for change, it's really important that you think about who is being impacted and not just about yourself and how you're being benefited, but like how communities who have been historically left out of these conversations and just haven't had access to these resources as much, like how they are like being incorporated into the process now, and how you can, like how the system can go about kind of rectifying those historical injustices. And I think food justice is a really important component of that, just with how much health impacts that's had over the years. And farmers of color as well, there's plenty of them out there that will also need help, like and support transitioning to more sustainable methods. And yeah, everything we do and everything we advocate for, it's important to incorporate environmental justice.
And I would say it's been really an important part of the Field to Fork campaign that we're not doing things that make food unaffordable for people. And so that's been a really important tenet as we look at any policy solutions or any of our market work. We want to improve the system without making food more expensive for people who have the least ability to afford it. So.
One last thing on environmental justice, I learned a couple in doing some research for presentation. We always think of environmental justice communities where either low income or people of color have an overburden are in the city or maybe in some of the inner ring suburbs. But if you go to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency and their areas of concern for environmental justice, and a majority of them are actually in rural Minnesota. And they are in agricultural communities, not all of them, but many of them are. So ag has a big effect on that on that end where it's produced, but then also, like Sasha mentioned, the environmental justice of food deserts and not having access to high quality food or clean water, because there is a lot of pollution involved in creating in the industrial agriculture system. So a lot of work in that respect as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and thank you all for joining. If nobody else has any questions and comments, I think that we did very well.
Just a reminder that next month's Water Action Wednesday is on September 8th at 7 p.m. Central Time, and the topic is incinerators. So we'll be talking about that. Sasha will be leading that presentation. So really excited to see and hopefully you all can join us.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Have a great
everybody.
night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.